take equity interest in banks. So we're partway along now toward nationalizing our banking sector as the federal government has substantial ownership interest in banks thanks to that TARP money that has been used to take equity interest in banks. And I don't think it's too much of a secret that when Secretary Paulson met with bankers to announce this TARP program, that behind closed doors, he bullied a lot of banks into taking TARP money when they didn't want it. The justification for that was if we let some banks take it and then other banks don't take it, the banks that take the TARP money then reveal themselves to be weak banks. So instead, Secretary Paulson pressured a lot of banks that didn't want to take that TARP money to take it. And now, Secretary Geithner is pressuring those banks not to repay that money. A lot of banks are in a position where they're thinking, because of federal control that this allows them to exercise over the banks, banks are thinking we want to get out from under this TARP money so that we don't have so much federal government control over our business, and yet the federal government is discouraging them from doing it. And so, in process, we're moving toward nationalizing the banking industry. So again, it's troubling to see the huge federal involvement in the banking sector. And one thing I want to emphasize as I'm talking about these policies is it's not Obama's policies I'm talking about. These are bipartisan policies. The Federal Reserve policies that I mentioned before, those are initiated under Ben Bernanke, chair of the Federal Reserve System, appointed by President Bush. And the TARP policies, the AIG bailout, those federal policies were begun under the Bush administration. All of that TARP money was approved under the Bush administration. By the time President Bush left office, only about half the TARP money had been spent, which meant that now, under the Obama administration, essentially the Secretary of the Treasury has a blank check. On the other hand, he's actually spent some of that money since he's come in. I think there's about $200 billion of that TARP money left, though, to be spent essentially at the discretion of the Secretary of the Treasury. So it's troubling to see this, and it's a major change in government policy, and because of the huge ownership now, because the federal government's taken that money and bought equity interest in banks, we're moving along toward nationalizing our banks. And we've seen some of the pressure that can be put on banks when Bank of America was absorbing Merrill Lynch. The CEO of Bank of America decided, well, we had some second thoughts on that, and he was pressured to complete the deal and absorb Merrill Lynch under the threat that he might lose his job if he didn't continue with the acquisition of Merrill Lynch. So after these companies take that TARP money, then they find themselves in a position where the federal government can pressure them in their businesses in other ways. The third thing I want to talk about is the Obama stimulus package. When President Obama took over, of course, he campaigned on the idea that the economy is really weak and we need some big leadership to turn the economy around. And part of what he wanted to do was to pass this stimulus package that would be a massive increase in government expenditures in order to try to support and stimulate the economy. And when you look at what was actually in the stimulus package, essentially it was a list of expenditures that just fulfilled Obama's campaign promises for campaign expenditures anyway. If you really want to stimulate the economy, if you think government expenditures are going to stimulate the economy, you probably want to be spending that money right away. But a bunch of the stimulus money that Obama got through Congress won't be spent until 2010 or later. That's not stimulus money. And a bunch is spent on stuff that's not stimulus anyway. For example, part of that stimulus money is going to extend unemployment benefits. Now, is it a good idea to extend unemployment benefits? I can argue yes or no on that. But what I will tell you is, if you extend unemployment benefits, it actually has the opposite effect of stimulating the economy. Unemployment benefits are paying people not to work. So when you set aside more money to pay people not to work, it doesn't help the recovery, it hinders the recovery. Maybe it's a good thing to do, maybe it's generous to help out people who are unemployed, but we can't call it stimulus because it doesn't stimulate the economy. Similarly, there's a whole bunch of healthcare expenditures that were in the stimulus package. Now, it might be good or might not be good to have the federal government spend more money on healthcare. But that's not something that's going to help to stimulate the economy. That's not something that's going to help the economic recovery. So when you look at the money, at how that stimulus money is being spent, it's really not stimulus at all. But I'll even question the premise that we need to spend that money to stimulate the economy. I mean, the premise behind that is that if we increase government spending, yeah, we're going to run big budget deficits, but those deficits help stimulate the economy and lower unemployment. But think about that for a minute. If that were true, back in 2000, when President Bush was elected, the federal budget was in surplus. And during the 8 years of the Bush administration, we increased government spending year after year so that the budget turned from surplus to deficit, and we ran larger and larger deficits year after year after year. If budget deficits were the road to prosperity, we'd be in nirvana now, not in the worst recession since the Great Depression. So you have to even question the premise that that's the solution that we need to help to improve the economy. The fourth thing I want to talk about is the bailouts. First of all, just let me talk about the whole idea in the abstract. Because when I teach my students economics at Florida State University, one of the key things I try to get across to them is the role of profit and loss in a market economy. If a company takes resources and rearranges those resources, produces something, and sells the output for more than it costs to buy the inputs, that's a good thing for us. That's a good thing for the economy. They're adding value to the economy if they can sell their output for more than what it costs to buy the inputs. And if they're doing a good thing for the economy like that, we should find a way to reward them. And indeed, in a market economy, there is a reward. It's called profit. Conversely, if a company takes resources, combines those resources, and produces output that's worth less than the resources they started with, that hurts the economy. That takes value away from the economy. If companies do that, we should find a way to penalize those companies. And in a market economy, there is a way. It's called losses. Companies that produce output that's worth less than the inputs they start with take losses, and if they keep taking those losses, eventually they go out of business. So the system of profit and loss is essential for the operation of a market economy, and it's a key feature that has allowed us to become as prosperous as we are today. So now, one of the big things in the news is the auto industry bailouts. So what we're doing is we're giving money hand over fist to companies that were taking value away from the economy. Now, if you go back to last summer during the presidential campaign when gas prices were at around $4 a gallon, one of the things President Obama campaigned on was putting an excess profit tax on the oil industry. Now, that's sort of gone away from his agenda because gas prices are back down. But if you look at that, the excess profits tax in the oil industry, combined with the base we now have for the auto industry, and look at that in the context of the role of profit and loss in the economy. What we have then is a policy that penalizes companies that are benefiting the economy, They make profits, we're going to tax them, we're going to penalize them. Those are the companies who are benefiting the economy. And we reward those companies that are harming the economy. If they take losses, we'll bail them out and reward them. It's a complete perversion of the profit